The morning Arman Qureshi found the old woman wandering barefoot near the busy intersection, the city was already roaring with impatience. Horns screamed, buses coughed black smoke into the pale daylight, and people rushed past as if kindness were a luxury they could not afford. Arman almost walked past her too. He almost told himself he was too tired, too broke, too burdened to care. But something about the way she stood there, fragile, confused, clutching a worn handbag like it held her entire world, made his steps slow down. That single decision would quietly rewrite his destiny. Before we go further, if you believe that even the smallest act of kindness can change a life, please like this video, comment your thoughts, share it with someone who needs hope today, and subscribe to the channel Whisper Tales 3. Your support keeps stories like this alive. Arman was a 32-year-old widower raising his 6-year-old son, Sammy, in a cramped one-room apartment above a mechanic shop. The paint peeled from the walls and the ceiling fan rattled like it was counting down to its last breath. Every morning he woke before sunrise, prepared a simple breakfast of bread and tea, packed Sammy's small school bag, and then rushed to catch the overcrowded bus to his job at a textile warehouse. The job barely covered rent and school fees, and some months he had to choose between electricity and groceries. Still, he carried himself with quiet dignity, refusing to let his hardships turn him bitter. That particular morning had already begun badly. His supervisor had warned that layoffs were coming. Sales were down, management was unhappy, and whispers spread across the warehouse floor like wildfire. Arman worked harder than ever, lifting heavy boxes until his back throbbed, hoping effort alone could secure his place. Fear sat heavy in his chest, because losing this job meant losing everything. So when he noticed the elderly woman standing lost at the roadside during his short lunch break, logic told him to ignore it. He needed to get back, he needed to keep his head down, but compassion outweighed caution. He approached her gently, noticing the tremble in her hands and the way her eyes searched the crowd without recognition. Her name, he learned slowly through her confused murmurs, was Meheranisa. She seemed disoriented, unsure of where she lived, and unable to recall how she ended up there. The sun beat down mercilessly, and the pavement burned beneath her bare feet. Arman guided her to a shaded tea stall and bought her a bottle of water with the little cash he had left for lunch. He removed his own worn sandals and insisted she wear them. The tea vendor shook his head in disbelief. People rarely paused for strangers anymore. Arman called the number written shakily on a folded paper inside her handbag. No answer. He tried again. Still nothing. He considered taking her to the nearest police station, but something about her frail state made him worry she would be frightened by uniforms and questions. Instead, he decided to escort her home himself once he confirmed the address scribbled on another card inside her purse. It was across town, far from his warehouse, and returning late from lunch could cost him his job. He hesitated for only a moment before helping her onto a bus. As the city blurred past the window, he thought of Sammy waiting after school, of unpaid bills stacked on the kitchen shelf, of the supervisor's warning. He whispered a silent prayer that he was not making a mistake. When they reached the address, Arman froze. Towering gates, manicured gardens, and a house that looked more like a palace stood before them. Security guards rushed forward in alarm as soon as they saw Meheranisa. Within seconds, the gates opened, and anxious faces poured out. Maids, drivers, and finally a tall, sharply dressed man whose authority was unmistakable. It was Saad Rahmani, the formidable owner of the very textile company where Arman worked. Arman's heart nearly stopped. He had seen Saad only from a distance during annual meetings. The man was known for his strict discipline and ruthless decisions. This was the boss who would soon decide which workers stayed and which were dismissed. And the elderly woman clinging to Arman's arm was his mother. Relief flooded Saad's face as he embraced Meheranisa, who suddenly seemed more lucid, recognizing her son's voice. The household had been searching for her all morning. She had slipped out unnoticed during her routine garden walk. Gratitude replaced panic as Saad turned to Arman, demanding to know how he had found her. Arman, overwhelmed and uncomfortable, simply explained that he had seen her lost and could not walk away. He expected nothing more than a polite thank you. Instead, Saad insisted he come inside. The contrast between Arman's modest life and the opulence of the Rahmani mansion felt almost cruel. Marble floors gleamed under crystal chandeliers, paintings adorned the walls, servants moved quietly, efficiently. Armin stood awkwardly near the entrance, aware of the dust on his trousers and the sweat on his brow. Mehrunisa reached for his hand before being led away to rest. Her cloudy eyes filled with tears of gratitude, and she whispered a blessing over him that made his throat tighten. It was not the wealth of the house that moved him, but the sincerity in her frail touch. The next day at work, rumors about the layoffs reached a fever pitch. Workers gathered in nervous clusters. Names would be announced by afternoon. Armin kept his head down, preparing himself for the worst. When his supervisor called him into the office, dread settled in his stomach like stone. Inside sat Saad Rahmani. The room felt too small for the weight of silence. Arman's pulse hammered in his ears. He braced himself for dismissal, rehearsing how he would explain it to Sami. But instead of termination papers, Saad placed a different document on the desk. He spoke not as a distant employer, but as a son whose mother had been returned safely. He had reviewed Arman's record, years of punctuality, no complaints, extra shifts volunteered without request, quiet consistency. Saad explained that kindness revealed more about a man than performance metrics ever could. He had decided not only to keep Armin on staff but to promote him to floor supervisor, with a salary increase and educational support for Sami. Armin felt the world tilt beneath him. It seemed unreal, like something out of a dream he was too afraid to believe. But the transformation was not just financial, it was emotional. For the first time since his wife's passing, Armin felt seen. Not pitied, not overlooked, seen. His simple act of compassion had echoed further than he could have imagined. That evening, as daylight softened the edges of the city skyline, Armin walked home holding Sami's small hand. He did not speak of promotions or wealth. He simply told his son that helping people matters, even when no one is watching. Sami listened carefully, his young face thoughtful, as if absorbing a lesson that would guide his entire life. Weeks later, Mehrunisa visited their modest apartment personally, bringing homemade sweets and warm blessings. She insisted on seeing where the man who saved her lived. There was no judgment in her gaze, only affection. She sat on their worn sofa and laughed with Sami, filling the tiny room with a warmth richer than any mansion. Sometimes the greatest miracles happen in broad daylight, disguised as ordinary choices. Armand did not help a stranger because she was important. He helped her because she was human. And in doing so, he proved that integrity shines brightest when no reward is expected. If this story touched your heart even a little, please like, comment, and share it with someone who needs a reminder that goodness still exists in this world. Your engagement helps spread messages that matter. Special request: comment the word kindness below if you believe small acts can change big destinies, because in the end, it was not wealth or power that saved Armand's future. It was a pair of worn sandals given freely on a scorching afternoon, and a heart brave enough to care when walking away would have been easier.